In this video, we will show how to assemble an APP53-86 pump. This is the toolkit to be used when assembling the APP53-86 pump. We are using European metric standard for the tools. Install the two large O-rings on each side of the center flange. Position the pump end housing vertically with the center flange end up. Lubricate the threads with PTFE. Insert the guide pin in the pump end housing. Lubricate the flange and pump end housing with clean filtered water. Position the center flange so that pinhole is in line with guide pin and housing. Carefully place the center flange on the pump end housing, again making sure guide pin is located in pinhole so bolt holes line up properly. Install the 15 M8x20 hex head bolts to affix center flange to pump end housing. Use a torque wrench to tighten all the hex head bolts to 30 Newton meters. Lubricate the threads on motor end housing with PTFE. Insert the guide pin in the center flange. Lubricate the center flange and motor end housing with clean filtered water. Position the motor end housing, similar to the pump end housing, so that the pinhole is in line with the guide pin in the flange. Carefully place the motor end housing on the flange, again making sure guide pin is in pinhole so bolt holes line up properly. Install remaining 15 M8x20 hex head bolts to affix the motor end housing to the center flange. Use a torque wrench to tighten all hex head bolts to 30 Newton meters. Carefully lay pump housing and center flange assembly down to a horizontal position. All future assembly will be done with the pump in this position. Lubricate the flushing valve cover with clean filtered water. Install the O-ring on the flushing valve cover. Install the spring. Install the valve cone. Lubricate the flushing valve cone with clean filtered water. Install the O-ring on the flushing valve cone. Install the flushing valve. Use a torque wrench or ratchet and the special tool to screw in the cover. Use a torque wrench to tighten the flushing valve cover to 30 Newton meters. Install and tighten the lifting eye. Install the O-rings on the 4 bleed plugs. Install the 4 bleed plugs, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Install the pin for the distance pipe. Install the 9 compression springs. Install the O-rings and backup rings on both of the valve plates. Be sure not to deform the backup rings during installation. Lubricate the motor end barrel sleeves and valve plate O-rings with clean filtered water. Position the valve plate loosely over the shaft close to the barrel and line up the valve plate inserts with the barrel sleeves. Install the first special tool washer. Install the distance pipe. Install the second special tool washer. Place the extractor sleeve over the shaft end. Install the M16x70 stud with nut through the extractor and thread into the shaft end. Be sure to lubricate threads with PTFE. Turn the nut clockwise and line up the valve plate with barrel. Tighten the nut to fully mount the valve plate to the barrel. Check to be sure the valve plate is mounted properly and there are no damaged O-rings. From the opposite end, install the 3 special M6x150 socket head cap screws through the motor end barrel and into valve plate. Tighten the special socket head cap screws. Remove the M16 by 70 stud, M16 nut, and the extractor sleeve. Remove the special tool washers and the distance pipe from the motor end barrel. Moving to the pump end barrel, install the locating pin for the distance pipe in the pump end barrel. Lubricate the barrel sleeves and the O-rings backup rings on the valve plate with clean filtered water. Install the special pump end shaft tool into ID of the pump end barrel. Place the valve plate over the special tool and line up valve plate to fit into the pump end barrel. Install the extractor sleeve over the special shaft tool. Install the M16 by 70 stud with nut through the extractor sleeve and thread into special shaft tool. Lubricate with PTFE if needed. Turn the nut clockwise and tighten until valve plate is fully mounted. Check to be sure the valve plate is mounted properly and there are no damaged O-rings. Remove the M16 nut, M16 by 70 stud, and the extractor sleeve. Remove the special shaft tool from ID of pump end barrel. Install the two O-rings for the cap screw holes and the O-ring in the motor end flange groove. Install the two locating pins for the swash plate into the motor flange. Lubricate the threads in the swash plate with PTFE. Position the swash plate so the pins and holes line up properly. Place the swash plate on the motor end flange. Install the two socket head cap screws to secure the swash plate to the motor end flange. Use a torque wrench to tighten the two socket head cap screws to 30 Newton meters. We will repeat the same steps for the pump end flange. Install the O-ring in the pump end flange groove and the two O-rings for the cap screw holes. Install the two locating pins into the pump end flange. Lubricate the threads and position the swash plate so the pins and holes line up. Place the swash plate on pump end flange. Install the two socket head cap screws to secure swash plate to the pump end flange. Use a torque wrench to tighten the two socket head cap screws to 30 Newton meters. Install the O-rings on the two bleed plugs. Install the two bleed plugs into the pump end flange. This is the port plate for the motor end of the pump. Locate the two guide pin holes in the port plate and the two guide pin holes in the center flange. Install the two guide pins into the center flange. Lubricate the center flange and the back side of the port plate with clean filtered water. Install the motor end port plate onto the center flange, lining up the pinholes and pins. Ensure that the port plate is positioned and mounted correctly. It should be flush against center flange and in the proper position. Lubricate the front side of the port plate with clean filtered water. Carefully center the motor end barrel and place barrel into the housing. Install the M8 by 40 socket head cap screw and nut into the special centering bracket tool. This tool will keep the motor end barrel in the proper position in order to assemble the rest of the pump. Notice the correct holes on the motor end housing and locate to mount the centering bracket. Using the center socket head cap screw, loosely mount the centering bracket to the shaft. Mount the centering bracket onto drive end housing using two M8 by 16 socket head cap screws. Make sure to use two threaded holes opposite from each other. Tighten the two socket head cap screws on the housing. Tighten nut against the tool bracket. Notice the end notch on each end of the distance pipe. They are there to properly space and orient the barrel assemblies in relation to each other. Install the distance pipe over the shaft end. Rotate the distance pipe until the end notch engages guide pin. Once engaged, the distance pipe will seat and no longer turn. Focusing now on the pump end assembly, locate the pinholes in port plate and install the pins in center flange. Lubricate the center flange and back side of the port plate with clean filtered water. Install the pump end port plate against the center flange, lining up the pinholes and pins. Ensure that the port plate is positioned and mounted correctly. It should be flush against center flange and in the proper position. Lubricate the front side of port plate with clean filtered water. Notice the position of the guide pin in the barrel. Notice the position of the notch in the distance sleeve. Loosely insert the barrel into the pump end housing. Be careful not to damage the main bearing during insertion. Install the cone bushing bolt to allow manual movement of the shaft, which will help you install the barrel. Turn the barrel till pin aligns with distance sleeve notch and fully install barrel. Once engaged, the barrel will seat and no longer turn independent of the shaft. Check that the cylinder barrel aligns with the bearing. Remove the cone bushing bolt. After removing cone bushing bolt, lubricate the shaft end thread with PTFE. Lubricate the shaft and cone bushing with clean filtered water. Install the cone bushing and M16x70 hex head bolt and tighten with a wrench. Return to the motor end of the pump. Remove the 3 socket head cap screws and the centering bracket tool. Remove the 3 special M6x150 valve plate socket head cap screws from inside the barrel. Lubricate the barrel sleeves and the shaft with clean filtered water. Mount the spring package and the retainer ball. For the APP78 and APP86, a distance washer is needed. Lubricate the retainer ball and the shaft with clean filtered water. Lubricate the 9 motor end pistons with clean filtered water. Lubricate the retainer plate and install onto the ball. Be sure to install it in the proper orientation. The ID bearing on the retainer plate is tapered and should mate with the ball smoothly. Insert the 9 pistons by hand, one at a time. Be careful not to scratch pistons during installation. Insert the guide pin into the motor end housing. Lubricate all the threads with PTFE. Lubricate the swash plate and the motor end flange with clean filtered water. Position the motor end flange so pinholes line up with guide pin. While supporting the motor flange, insert the long hex head support bolt through the flange and into the housing at top position. Be careful not to scratch swash plate during installation. Install the 3 short hex head support bolts with nuts equally spaced as shown. Thread the support bolts into housing loosely by hand. Adjust nuts on 3 hex head support bolts with open end wrench until nuts install motor flange. This will compress the spring package and allow the installation of the flange socket head cap screws. Install 4 of the M8x30 socket head cap screws as shown and tighten. Remove all 4 of the hex head support bolts. Install all of the remaining socket head cap screws. Use a torque wrench to tighten the socket head cap screws to 30 Newton meters. Lubricate the shaft and motor end flange seal area with clean filtered water. Install the shaft seal spacer. Lubricate the rotating shaft seal portion with clean filtered water. Install the shaft seal onto shaft, making sure the carbon ring faces outwards. Use the press bushing tool to completely install the rotating portion of the shaft seal. Lubricate the shaft seal cover assembly with clean filtered water. Carefully install the stationary part of the shaft seal using the press bush. Lubricate the entire seal and cover assembly with clean filtered water. Install the O-ring onto the shaft seal cover. Install the shaft seal cover. Install the 4 M6x12 socket head cap screws and use a torque wrench to tighten to 15 Newton meters using an alternating pattern. Insert the key into the keyway. Install the coupling hub onto the drive shaft. Use a wood piece between hub jaws as an anti-rotation backstop. Return to the pump end of the pump and use a torque wrench to tighten the M16 hex head cone bushing bolt to 250 Newton meters. Lubricate the pump end barrel sleeves and shaft with clean filtered water. Install the spring package and the retainer ball. Lubricate the retainer ball with clean filtered water. Lubricate the 9 pump end pistons with clean filtered water. Lubricate the retainer plate and install. Again, ensure proper orientation. Insert the 9 pistons by hand. Be careful not to scratch the pistons during the installation. Lubricate all the pump end housing threads with PTFE. Lubricate the piston shoe faces with clean filtered water. Insert the guide pin into the pump end housing. Position the pump end flange so the pinholes line up with guide pin. Lubricate the swash plate and pump end flange with clean filtered water. While supporting the end flange, install the long support bolt at top position. Be careful not to scratch the swash plate during installation. Install the 3 small support bolts with nuts, equally spaced as shown. Thread the support bolts into housing using an open-end wrench. Adjust nuts on 3 hex head support bolts with an open-end wrench until nuts install motor flange. This will compress the spring package and allow the installation of the flange socket head cap screws. Install 4 of the M8x30 socket head cap screws as shown and tighten. Remove all 4 of the hex head support bolts. Install all of the remaining socket head cap screws. Use a torque wrench to tighten the socket head cap screws to 30 Newton meters. The pump has now been fully assembled and is ready to use.